Welcome to Beyond the Competition, the SAE University Programs Podcast. Hey guys, welcome back to the show. I'm Mike Sorg, the media and podcast producer with the SAE University Programs, and also with us, also representing SAE, is Scott Schultz back in the studio with us. How you doing, Scott?
I'm good, Mike. How are you?
Excellent. I am very excited. It is 50 years of Baja. We're celebrating today as part of that. And I think we're going to be celebrating for the next year or something like that, right?
We sure are.
Yeah, excellent. Excited for that. We got a great guest coming up with us here. We have Dr. William Shapton with us on the line. How you doing, William?
I'm doing okay.
You were there at the conception of Baja SAE that we get to enjoy every year here.
Yes, I was involved with what we called Rev 73, 4, and 5 that were a design competitions that led into Baja.
Excellent. We'll get into all the details of that. But of course, Scott likes to start off the show with a little bit of an icebreaker question. Get a little weird with us for the moment, Scott. What you got?
That's right, Mike. We like to start each pod with getting a little weird with a weird question. Doctor, have you ever TP'd a house before?
I've never been involved with that. I've been the recipient of that.
Really? Did you find out who did it to you?
Oh, it was pretty clear to me from the beginning, yes. So.
Did you get revenge on them?
Well, somewhat, yes.
Do you want to get into it or no?
They were SAE students, yes. They were having a good time.
Okay.
I think that's all we need to know about that one before we get anybody in trouble. Excellent. Well, let's get into talking about what we're here for about Baja. Again, it's a really big milestone for us here this year with the Baja competition. Myself, I've been fortunate to be involved in about the last 10 years of this event as well. And Scott, I think you were introduced to it, about 4 or 5 years ago? 5 years ago. So yeah, so it's a Scott. What is your out of all the competitions? What are your impressions of Baja over the other ones that we do with SAE?
I'd say easily the most energy and excitement around it,
and the dirtiest usually.
Dusty for sure.
Yeah,
but I mean, you don't even notice it because you're the feeling, the electricity of the event, it just jolts you. You don't even notice the dirt.
And we're not even talking about Ohio with those power lines. Anyways,
right.
If you know, you know. But first question here, what inspired you for the creation of Baja SAE, and how did that concept, entirely come to life for you?
Well, as I say, it kind of grew out of some trial competitions that were called Rev 73, 74, and 75. And what we had seen was senior design had kind of become just a final 1 semester, 1 quarter course. It really didn't involve the building of anything. And so the students never really had the opportunity to see if their design worked. There wasn't any interest in the manufacturability of it. And of course, since it never really went to hardware, it was never tested. And even today, as we see the space vehicle companies, their testing is quite extreme. They have a number of tests. They have much better design software and everything than we had, but you still need to test. It really was a huge concern for Neil Armstrong when he went on his moon flight, Apollo 11, that they really hadn't had an opportunity to test many of the stages of that, to actually lift off again from the moon. They really had never been able to test the lunar lander in low moon gravity. He was a test pilot. He knew when you first take the airplane out, you just taxi down the runway and then come back in. Well, we fix all of the hydraulic leaks and stuff. And eventually you do a takeoff and you go around half a circle and land again, a touch and go. And again, you come back and you start fixing things. So yes, testing is an important part of it. So the engineering faculty, in many cases, were second-generation academics. They nor their professors had actually been involved in the design, manufacturing of a product. And so in our design course, it was sort of an application of our stress analysis courses. We didn't really talk about the manufacturability, and we had no opportunity to do the other things. So, yes, we wanted to come up with something that we could do that would involve the actual manufacturing of something. And in order to make it competitive, the students like to compete. Just no question about it. You mentioned this. There's an electricity at the events. And the idea of competing with it inspired them to really get into it. So, yes, it gave them a chance to put it into hardware that involved the manufacturing, fabrication. So we began to design to be buildable. And we began to involve the actual competition or testing phase of it. So it kind of grew out of that. As a result, many design programs went to a full year of senior design because we needed time to do the design and the fabrication and do some testing.
Once the idea was conceived, what was your role in transforming it into a fully fledged competition?
Well, I did work with John Stevens, and as I say, John Stevens hosted the first of the mini Bajas when he was at South Carolina. Now, I was helping to get the information out to schools, getting the invitations sent to the faculty, the student sections. So I mainly was helping to get things organized with the competitors while he got busy getting the course organized and getting ready to actually hold the event.
Do you remember how many teams were there in your first competition?
In our first competition, the Rev 73, there were 6 teams. By the time that we held the first Baja at South Carolina, we had about 15 teams enter the competition.
And what challenges did you and the early organizers face when getting the event first off the ground?
Well, we had to come up with a low-cost competition in order for the schools to be interested in participating. The deans were not in favor of this whole thing. We were beginning to base promotions much more on the number of publications and in particular the amount of funded research with overhead that you brought in. So we had to keep this under the radar until it was far enough along when the dean found out about it that he would throw into it because of the student interest. So very critical to this early part of this was the participation of Briggs and Stratton, in particular Fred Stratton Jr., who took over Briggs and Stratton, and his chief engineer, Bob Catterson, from the Milwaukee section. They volunteered to donate the engines. So everybody ran the same engine. So whoever could afford the biggest engine wasn't going to win the thing. We all had the same power plant and you didn't fool with it in the early competitions. So it was just to design the rest of the vehicle so that it was competitive and that it would do well. John Stevens, in the year before the first Baja, he was at the University of Miami in Ohio, which was known at that time as the birthplace of coaches. Many college and professional coaches came out of the University of Miami in Ohio. Unfortunately, his students, when they got their vehicle about ready to go with tractor-type tires with a big rough tread, decided to go out and test their vehicle one evening. And looking for a good field to drive it on, they picked the football field. About 2 days later, the dean of engineering was presented with a bill from the athletic department for resodding the football field. So there were lots of ups and downs, but the idea was we had to get it low enough cost that the students could envision doing it. And once you saw you had a free engine, Goodyear offered to donate tires or given at cost. If the tires and the engine were there, you thought you could go ahead and manage this thing, design and build it. You could get some steel from the local section of SAE. Some member of it was fabricating things, had a little steel for the frame or whatever. So yes, it was a relatively low cost out of your pocket expense, and it caught on.
I think it's really cool to see that the relationship with Briggs and Stratton started so early with this event as well, and something that has developed over the years as well. But could you describe for us a little bit of what those early, the competition themselves were like for Baja SAE?
For the Baja, as I say, John Stevens hosted one at South Carolina. He then hosted one at Southwestern Louisiana State following year. That one, we were beginning to really max out how many teams he could allow. And the following year, it broke into 3 competitions, each one of them having about 15. So a total of about 50 schools involved. We began to see Canadian schools coming across to what we call the Midwest Baja. Schools from Mexico coming across mainly for the Baja West. But things began to develop. One of my favorite competitions was hosted by Arizona State, Mike Nielsen, in Tempe, Arizona, where the course was up and down in a dry riverbed that runs through town. It's used when we have a rain event that floods. They then use this, but during the rest of the year, it's basically a dry riverbed. And you raced around a bridge abutment at one end and then back around a bridge abutment at the other end, up and down the riverbed. It was one of the events with the most spectators. The bridges all along that riverbed were jammed with people watching the vehicles up and down of it. But it really was a great event, and it helped. So yes, we went from 15 or so vehicles the first year, very soon about 50 vehicles. And as I say, eventually, in not too long a time, it reached about 100 vehicles per event.
It's nice to see that spectators were interested back in those early days too.
The spectators were local television did televise the last of the Rev competitions. And, but yes, then by the time we got into 78 or so, CBS and NBC were having it reported and televising the events.
Awesome.
So there was interest of spectators and of the public.
I love how full circle this has gone, because I know just recently Baja SAE, I believe it was the Maryland event, was featured on PBS's Motor Week. So it's great to see that kind of mainstream media coverage and we've seen, I think, several local affiliates at some of the competitions, Baja and otherwise, over the last couple of years as well. So very cool to see that still getting that exposure, I guess.
What were the most significant changes and developments you've seen over the years of Baja?
Well, as I say, one of the big changes was senior design became a design course involving, in most schools, going to a full year. And of course, it involves a lot of projects other than SAE. But SAE was instrumental with the Baja series in getting senior design back as the design, fabrication in many cases, but evaluation. In those first events, the faculty in the design department had no idea how long it took to get the thing built and running and tested. They didn't do that kind of thing. They were really, as I say, kind of stress analysis people. Their idea of teaching design was that, applying it to various things. But they didn't really worry about the manufacturability or whether it was really cost competitive. So there was a big change in how we viewed senior design. ABET changed their criteria for evaluation of an engineering program. And there's just no question that SAE and the mini Bajas were fundamental, and that followed by the other collegiate competitions, fundamental in that change of introducing design into the curriculum.
So do you still maintain friendships with that first organization team and your early organization teammates that helped you put this together initially?
Yes, some of them still speak to me. Not all. Most of them really put out to help get this thing rolling. And they've been extremely successful in most cases in industry. Of course, we're celebrating 50 years, so you understand they've been retired now for 15 years or so, but in many cases. But yes, I do maintain with many of them. Yeah, we get along. We get together every once in a while for this, that, or the other thing.
What are you most proud of when looking back at your years involved in Baja SAE?
I really enjoyed the collaboration of the Milwaukee section and other sections in joining with the students and getting them involved. So that, yes, this brought the student sections, student branches of SAE much closer to the parent sections. They worked together in many of these cases, but especially Bob Catterson at the Milwaukee section and others. They sponsored the Midwest Baja many times, often at a motocross track. So you went around in something of a circle as opposed to the Arizona one up the riverbed. But yeah, it had an influence. As a matter of fact, we saw changes in how you transferred from student membership to professional membership in SAE. We made that easier to capture that student interest at that time. So there were a lot of good things that came out of this. And I do maintain friendship, as I say, with many of them. They often, especially when we would host one, it was the students that saw what had to be done and got it taken care of. I just showed up at the event that I was supposed to be sponsoring. One of the events, again, that I really liked was hosted by Michigan Tech and the Army Tank and Automotive Command Research Center, the Keweenaw Research Center under Ed Nemi. We hosted an event, again, that was a little different than some of the others. We went from the abandoned town of Mandan on the copper, up on the copper country. Michigan's like that, but the Keweenaw Peninsula goes up here. US 41 goes up the middle of that peninsula. And Mandan was an old mining town. We started at Mandan and ran about 25 miles through the woods, ending up at the tip of the peninsula and coming from the end of US 41 down the road into Copper Harbor, where we had the finish line. Now, again, the students, Michigan Tech was hosting that. They had a club on campus, the Michigan Tech four-wheelers. separate from SAE, but they had the big trucks with the winch on the front, and they went and opened up, cleared a trail through the woods for 20 some miles. It followed logging trails where loggers had been before, but even calling these 2 tracks was very, that was giving them a lot of credit. They were trails through the woods, so the 4-wheelers went in and they were getting the logs off of the thing so that the vehicles could follow it through, putting up signs if there was a fork in the road, which way to go. And then at the end of that competition, they were instrumental in then going back in and hauling out all the vehicles that didn't survive. But one student organization after another helped out on this. But yes, that one that ran, you could point on the map. Yes, we started here, and yes, we ended up here through the woods. And again, that one was televised, the end of it and the very beginning of it, locally, and made it on to several programs. But yes, the students were heavily involved in all of them.
Well, it sounds like the competition was really influencing the teamwork when it came to a lot of these schools, and obviously across different schools as well. And we still see that a little bit to this day. Excuse me. So, how do you think Baja has generally influenced that engineering education broadly for these students?
Well, again, I think it's just really introduced a project that goes and gets tested and has to be done on time. And bringing that into the design curriculum, it's just been a huge contribution. It prepares students for industry. Instead of taking a year and a half or 2 years for the student when he goes into industry to get the idea of what happens to the design, what's involved in a product. They get at least an introduction to it through Baja.
It's always hard to beat hands-on experience, You can only learn so much from reading a book. But what are some of your favorite memories from the early competitions or any competition that you've been to?
Well, again, I really always remember that Arizona one, hosted by Arizona State at Tempe, up the riverbed. I thought that was a great one. If we could have had more of them where spectators who happened to be crossing the bridge and saw what was going on, saw something was going on. We really don't invite spectators much, but I liked that competition very much.
So, and again, still in looking back, what do you hope the Baja SAE leaves as a legacy for future generations?
I'm really hoping that these students and others get involved with SAE. Many of us right now are reluctant to join organizations, anything from a campus organization to the church. We just don't join very much. And if you can get involved with SAE as a student, I think it helps. And if you can then transfer your membership when you graduate, I'd like to see them get more involved and to have the sections do better. The Cincinnati section helped sponsor us, and that really doesn't exist anymore. So, yes, I'd like to see the SAE benefit from this.
Do you have any advice for students looking to get into Baja or those trying to get their car out there for the first time?
Leave yourself some time. That's it. You need to test it. Today, compared to the early ones, we have such great design software, solid modeling, the whole works. But, as I say, even in the space industry, we need to test this stuff.
Final question here. Was there a point, obviously, you have high hopes whenever you start any kind of program like this with this vision, but was there any point where you realized that you were building something a little even bigger than you had imagined in your scope?
Oh, for sure. Working with John Stevens with the Louisiana event, we limited that to about 16 vehicles. The next year, we had a Baja East, Midwest, and West with around 16 schools apiece. About 50 schools participated. And yes, I did not expect that it would take off like that. And it continued to grow quite rapidly. But yeah, when it broke into the 3 competitions, the Florida Bowl with Charles Knuckles, the West, which again began to attract a team from Mexico, then moved up to Oregon. Having the whole country involved and hosting it at that rate, and the amount of student interest.
And then obvious today, I mean, I think the 3 competitions average, like, you can correct me on this, Scott, about between like 80 and 100 teams, if not a little bit more, depending on the competition. We see regularly teams from Brazil. We see, of course, Mexico, as you mentioned, Canada. There's other versions of Baja SAE, I know, in Brazil and several other countries. So it's really become like pretty much a worldwide phenomenon at this point, right?
And also, the Baja kind of was a part of the SAE Collegiate Design Competitions. It helped and it spun off one year the mini Baja, where our vehicle got 200 miles per gallon during that competition. Unfortunately, it was within sight of the finish line when it hit some bales of hay that were protecting it. Turns out the steering wheel had broken loose from the steering column. We went back and looked at the weld for the fixture. It was a bunch of little BB-sized weld beads. Not a really smooth weld job, but it held until... So the driver jumped out, grabbed the vehicle, and shoved it across the finish line. Greg, things evolved, but out of that really came the Supermileage competition hosted by Eaton, and really a part of the vehicle that came out of Arizona State as a part of that competition up the dry riverbed. In many ways, that inspired Formula SAE. It took a little while more for it to develop, but yeah, he was building a desert race car. We were expecting big hills, and he went up and down this riverbed. It was sandy, very dusty, compared to the Midwest Baja on a motocross track where they put in an artificial swamp. They made a lot of mud on that track, and the drivers wore helmets with visors, and they couldn't see a thing after a couple of rounds through that mud hole.
Yep.
But yes, it's been a great change.
Fantastic. And again, we just recently, in the recent years, celebrated, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 40 years of a Formula SAE. And really cool to see how both of these competitions have kind of grown, them from a parking lot, I think at Texas A&M, if I'm not mistaken, you guys, and I mean, it sounds like you guys had more interesting of a, at least, hearing from the riverbed to the city to the, all these kinds of stories are really tremendous. Do you find yourself getting out to competition from time to time still?
Once in a while, I'll get down to the Formula SAE at the Michigan International Speedway. And I did help advise a team there a couple of times. And I have memories of that. And I am in contact with those students today. But one of the events that came out of that, Mike Terry was our chief engineer, and he was the driver. And we had read the rules, but somehow we really had missed a little bit about the braking competition, in that you had to accelerate to a finish line and then apply the brakes. And you were scored on how quickly you stopped. And to keep you honest, you were scored on how quickly you got to that point, your acceleration. And it was being judged, and I'm sorry I've forgotten the name right now, but a leading General Motors research design head, and our car couldn't lock its brakes up.
Mhm.
We could put on brakes, we could slow it down, but we couldn't lock up all four wheels. And she was very impressed with how Mike and the team went back. They adjusted the brake pressure between the front wheels and the rear wheels. And sometimes we could lock up the front, then we could lock up the rear. We had enough tire air pressure trying to get the tires so they would slide easier, that when we put the brakes on, it would skid. Trying to lock up the brakes, but just the methodology and how he stuck to it and how he went about it. She invited him for dinner that night with pretty much the clear thing that if he could carry on a conversation, he had a heck of a future with General Motors.
Mm-hmm.
With her and him, he decided to go. He'd already kind of committed to go build snowmobiles, and he didn't accept the invitation. But yeah, a lot of things happened, and he has done very well since then, along with the rest of that team. But a lot of memories.
Very, very cool. It's great picking your brain, but maybe I'll see a competition and pick your brain on a few more stories in the future. Okay.
Possibly so.
Excellent. Thank you so much, William. It's really great. Again, this is a heck of a milestone here for Baja SAE, not slowing down anytime soon. You're hearing this, the fall Carolina has just come by, and of course we're gearing up for a big season in 2026. And any last words to send us out on there?
No, it's just that I really still, the students, faculty really enjoy this competition. The deans finally caught on, and they don't oppose it anymore. They may not strongly support it, but I think in many cases they do. Another thing that's kind of amazed me is how many of those schools, in fact, where the deans do support, actually have separate facilities for building the vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
And a machinist assigned to helping build those competition vehicles. General Motors Institute, the OGMI, which is now Kettering University, has a test track for the vehicles. Just how it's really caught on and been supported by many of the schools. I think how it's influenced that. It's quite a tribute to Bob Catterson and Fred Stratton, who really, their contribution can't be underrated in getting it started by making it economically feasible for the event to go.
Excellent. And again, we've seen some of those spaces. I know we've been doing our tours with UCLA, University of Michigan, Penn College in Philadelphia, and we've seen a lot of those really cool spaces that are dedicated to these competitions, Baja, Formula, Aero Design, and it's really cool to see all that grow up out of that. Well, William, thank you so much. I don't want to take any more of your time today, but thank you for having a chat with us about this. And again, everybody, keep checking in on everything. Follow the SAE University programs on your YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. Make sure you follow this podcast on your favorite podcast provider. And if it's not over there for whatever reasons, we know they pop up every day, please hit us up, contact SAE, and we'll do what we can to make sure it is in there. So make sure you don't mix a beat of what's going on, and make sure you're the most prepared and knowing the history around what's happening with the SAE University programs, the Baja, Formula, Aero Design, and the like, and whatever else comes up here, and other opportunities that may be a part of this. Thank you, everybody, and until next time, stay safe out there. Thank you for listening to Beyond the Competition, the SAE University Programs podcast. Show notes for this episode can be found at beyondthecompetition.fireside.fm. Remember to stay tuned for updates on your competition's newsfeed or app, and follow SAE_University Programs on TikTok and Instagram. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you next episode.